All right, thank you, everybody. We're going to get ready for our next presentation, and I'd like to introduce our next speaker. This is Amy Hassa. She has a master's degree in social work from Rutgers University. She develops, provides, and supports mental health trainings throughout New Jersey under several grants. She teaches mental health first aid. She currently is developing curricula for adults who work with children with special needs in the area of mental health. She's on a task force for the state of New Jersey on the issue of mental health and safety in public schools. She's on the Hamilton Township School Board. And as if all that weren't enough, she is a Girl Scout volunteer in Central and Southern New Jersey. She's currently leading a cadet troop of 18 girls, so bravo for a large cadet troop. She's also had several service unit team positions, including recruiter, cookie booth coordinator, and public relations. So let's welcome Amy Hassa.
So excited to be here with you today to discuss celebrating inclusivity. So I'm thankful for all of you who came out today, and let's get started, okay? So as we begin to talk about inclusivity, and when this topic was first brought to my attention, I'm a recruiter. So of course the first thing I started thinking about is inclusivity truly starts when we start recruiting. How are we recruiting? Who exactly are we recruiting to? Who are we reaching out to, and how are we reaching out to them? And the truth is, when we think about recruitment, our mind automatically goes to those individuals who start out with the flyers in September and May and are going into the schools, but recruitment is so much more than that. When we recruit the most is when we're the most visible. Any idea when that is? Cookie season, absolutely. So cookie season, we are all recruiters. We're out there at the tables waiting for people to come to the tables and talk to them, and our girls are there. What are our girls, what presentation are our girls making? Who are we reaching out to? Are we talking to the moms that are walking by with the daughters, but maybe not talking about the opportunity to the dads walking by with the daughters? Who are we talking to in those moments? So recruitment is really our first opportunity for inclusivity. So as we're looking at our recruitment efforts, one of the things to consider is something called implicit bias. Now, don't put a whole lot on my slides, but some of these are jam-packed. So if there's stuff that you guys have questions about afterwards, I'm just gonna touch on some of these really big things that could have trainings all by themselves, kind of just touch on them briefly. So implicit bias is one of those really big things. As a social worker, I actually do a youth mental health training, and we do a whole section on implicit bias. What implicit bias is, it's a bias that we have, but we don't necessarily know that we have. So for instance, do we have thoughts or feelings when a car pulls into a handicap spot, but the person who gets out doesn't look handicapped? Do we have thoughts and feelings about the kid who comes in disheveled and them causing trouble versus the girl who's yes ma'am, no ma'am, who looks a lot more clean cut and together? All of those things are things that we do unconsciously. And implicit bias plays a huge role in inclusivity because we may not even realize who we're talking to and how we're connecting with them because we don't know who we're concerned about approaching. So implicit biases, there's all sorts of great quizzes online to kind of do a check on your own implicit biases. And when you take some of these quizzes, it's eye-opening because it allows you to see what things are going on in my head, what perceptions do I have, just like Donna had mentioned, that I don't even know are there. So as we're recruiting and as we're reaching out to girls, if we're noticing that our troops look an awful lot the same, is it because those are the only girls reaching out? Or are those the girls we're most comfortable reaching out to? As we start to look at other things, we want to recognize, right from the start, are we bringing opportunities to all? For instance, troops that have youth that are differently abled, schools in our community that are disability schools, these are much more difficult troops. Are we recruiting at these schools? Are we recruiting at the charter schools? Are we recruiting at the schools with a less than ideal reputation? All of these things are part of the conversation as we're talking about the recruitment efforts right from the start. Of course, after we go from getting out there and recruiting, it goes to our fantastic troop organizers. And I say to you, anyone who is a troop organizer, God bless you. I was a troop organizer for a few minutes, and then I really decided I like talking to people way more. It's kind of my thing. I wasn't as much about begging people, hey, could you take another girl? Because it was frustrating me when people would tell me no. And my service unit, when I said that I would be the troop organizer, the rule was, you can be the troop organizer if you stop taking all the girls. I believe I had that conversation with you, Renee. So here's the thing, is troop organization is not an easy task. And of course, we're very different than any other organization. So Boy Scouts, for instance, and I know that's a bad word in this room sometimes, I know, because right now they're not being as nice as they should be. But that's okay, conflict resolution. So when we're looking at other organizations, like churches and Boy Scouts, and they say, these are your kids, have a good day. In Girl Scouts, we're like, you want to be a leader? You do? Really? Okay, what can we do? Where can we put you? Can we help you find a place? Can I pick up your dry cleaning? What can we do for you? And we get really excited because we want these individuals not just to be a leader for now, we want them to love us forever. Because then they'll keep the girls, and they'll keep the girls engaged. And, you know, having those kinds of leaders, we are the most accommodating and appreciative of all organizations. So in doing that, what happens is you have the troop leader that says, I'm happy to be a troop leader, but I only want my own neighbors that I know who have 5 letters in their last name. Or I only want the girls that come from my particular church. Or I only want girls that I already know their parents. And when we say to them, but we have this great list of girls that want to be a scout, they're like, yeah, I'll only do 6. I'm done. And we're like, okay, well, we'll learn to make it work with you. As Girl Scouts, one of our things is right from the start, if we allow troop leaders to know, we love you, we appreciate you, but part of the job you're signing up for is having at least 12 girls. And even if you're coming in with a group of 4 or 5 girls that you're excited about having, we're going to give you more girls so that your girls can learn to make friends, so that these girls can have the skills, learn together, build together, and constantly become a better team. And we're going to look at that teamwork throughout the presentation. So we need to set those conversations up right from the start. So that way, when they come in, they know the job they're signing up for is not teaching their girl, but teaching the girls. As we start to look at this, we want to understand what are their barriers. And we know this conversation because we have conversations with parents all the time. What are your barriers for your child to become a scout? Having that conversation, what is your barrier for wanting to take on girls you don't know, is a great opportunity for our service unit managers and our service unit leadership. Figuring out what is it that they're concerned about, because it might be something simple. And if we work that out with them right from the start, they may be open and excited to the new opportunity to take on new girls in a way that they're comfortable with. So as we begin to look at troop organization, this is really our next main part of inclusivity. Of course, we want to make sure that we're thinking outside of the box. We're allowing leaders to reach outside of their comfort zones. And all of these things are part of us really, truly training a leader. And that's going to be something that's ongoing, and that's going to be support that councils and service units are regularly participating in. Now, when we talk about diversity in youth, automatically our minds typically go to things like culture, religion, and the truth is, our youth is way more diverse than that. We're looking at youth that are questioning their own gender. We're looking at youth that are dealing with the realization of mental illness. And we're looking at youth that have all different diversities outside of the diversities we normally discuss. What's their background? Do they have one mom, two moms, a mom and a dad in the same house, a mom and a dad in different states? Do they spend part of their time in this state and part of their time in another state? Do they have abuse histories? All of these things play to diversity. And of course, physical, mental, learning disabilities, these are all components of diversity as well. How does that child hear? How does that child learn? And getting to know our kids means getting to understand that each one of our children in front of us is a diverse youth by nature. Because even two kids, now any of you who have two children, I have two children, you can have two children come out of the same house and they are diverse children. Can someone explain this to me? Because I don't know how that happens, but my daughter and my son, they are very different humans. And then again, my husband and I are very different humans, so that kind of makes a little bit of sense. But in the same respect, we were the same two people who raised my daughter. Here's the thing. All of these girls are going to be diverse. And so when we're looking at diversity, this is something that's naturally occurring. It's not, even though we want to make more inclusivity and we want to recognize what our implicit biases are, diversity is happening automatically. It's happening just because the girls coming in are not Stepford. They're not carbon copies of each other. And we have the opportunities, as Dana had said before, to either look at a situation and say, okay, this is going to be hard, or embrace it and see what can we do to help this and make us a better troop. Of course, understanding youth is different because we didn't grow up in this current society. And I'm going to say one word, and you're all going to look at me. Technology, right? And I have half the room that was with me when, computers were something where you had to do colon, backslash, and you had to remember the codes. And then some of you are like, what? You had to type in what, where? Yeah, DOS. Google it. Okay, so, right? Okay, well, so when we looked at these computer things and went, this isn't going to catch on, it's big and heavy, and really, and now we have something in our pockets that's actually more powerful than what the scientists had when we were first learning computers. Our youth are carrying around in their pockets a window to the world. And it's something that they can communicate with instantaneously. So they want to learn about their culture. It's not just about block parties and which restaurant you bring your kid to and how you celebrate your holidays. It's now, they don't have to open up or crack, as my mother says, the Encyclopedia Britannica. I know you didn't read it. The bind wasn't cracked. She said this to me the other day. I gave them away. The only ones you read were D and F. I know this, because those were the ones that had the bindings cracked. So the kids, they're able to say, youth in Florida are out there fighting for things that youth in California are able to support them in. They're able to be diverse in a different way than we will ever understand. So when we talk about understanding diversity, it comes to a point in which we have to accept that this is their reality. And sometimes their reality is going to make us feel uncomfortable. And sometimes their reality is going to make us be like, seriously? A boy, a girl, it should be one thing, right? But to them, it's not. And to some of our millennials, it's not. And their feelings and beliefs are legitimate. Just like, it's amazing how well these topics really marry each other, because the truth is, this is where they're coming from, and how we feel about what their diversity is doesn't matter, because they still believe it, own it, and they need people to accept it. So as we have these different youth coming to us, we need to understand that there's a lot of things that we weren't taught. The school-to-prison pipeline is a real thing, absolutely a real thing. As a school board member, I can tell you, we just got our park results the other day. The school-to-prison pipeline is a real thing. And part of that is implicit bias. And part of that is the fact that We do different things in different districts. There is different money in different districts. So when we are looking at the fact that our brown and our black students are going to prison more and are not completing high school at a higher rate, that is real. When we're looking at things like mental illness, we need to understand that 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by the age, any guesses? 14. Who said it? Nicely done. 14. But we're looking at anxiety beginning as early as 5 and 6. The minute the parent goes, really, I know I told you not to talk to strangers, but you really should sit on this man with the red pants and the big beard's lap and smile. Right about that time, anxiety's time. And if you frown this time, do it again. You'll smile next time, right? Anxiety is beginning early. We're like separation anxiety. We say it very naturally about our babies, our little guys. Anxiety is real. So when we're looking at these different mental illnesses, and we're looking at the medical component to a lot of these mental illnesses, we're registering the fact that these things are affecting our children in primary school, in elementary school. And if we're not dealing with it until they get older, 75% of lifetime mental illness by the age of 24. So we are seeing that this is legitimate and real. This is their world. Anybody ever heard of ACEs? My person in the second row. We'll talk. I love it. All right, ACEs is something called Adverse Childhood Experiences. Now, if you haven't heard about it, look it up. It's amazing. And like I said, sorry, this slide is the one that is the most packed. I get very passionate when it comes to this. Adverse Childhood Experiences is a list of 10 questions in which they're looking at an individual and saying, what's your background? Have you had any negatives? Were you raised by somebody who abused you? Do you have sexual abuse in your history? Has anybody in your family been to prison? Have you at any time lived in a house in which people yelled and screamed and abused each other? And they look at these adverse childhood experiences. And what they've found is incredible. This was not a small group that they tested. We're looking at youths it was over 100,000 youth. And when they did this study, what they found was game-changing. Not only were youth that scored a 4 or higher on this quiz more at risk of things like mental illness, substance abuse, obesity, they're more at risk of heart disease, cancer, and a plethora of other medical diagnoses. So when we're looking at adverse childhood experiences, we're looking at the adverse effects of toxic stress. And if they had a 6 or higher, they were more than likely to have a 20-year less life expectancy than their counterparts who did not experience those same things. We become the parents, the support system, the constant for many of these girls. And their parents, if you're somebody who went through this throughout your youth and throughout growing up, these adverse childhood experiences, your child is more likely to have some of these diagnoses. So are we getting a child who's experienced this themselves? Or are we getting children of parents who've experienced difficult situations? And all of this is being dropped on the lap of a volunteer. Well, one of our presenters said this morning, whose kid said, hey, we don't have a troop leader. I said you could do it. We don't have the training in this. So this is one of those things to consider, is that as we're beginning to get these youth, their diversity is something so much more extensive than just physical disability, cultural differences, and religion. We look at different perspectives. Now, we have our fabulous little girl who's standing at the front of the mountains. How many mountains does she see? Okay. And our girl at the back of the mountains, how many mountains does she see? Who's right? They both are. But how many of you who are on social media have heard the Yanni and the Laurel argument? Or I've gotten looks. Or the gold and white dress versus the blue and brown dress. Did we all know in our heads that both sides were right? That it was meant to play a trick on our heads? Absolutely. How many of us knock down, drag out, thought what we heard or what we saw was correct, and how could you possibly see white and gold if I see blue and brown? How could you possibly, and this is something so little and so small. But our perspectives play a key component. So when we're looking at our youth's perspectives, we're looking at the fact that many of our youth are going through situations that, again, we can't necessarily understand. And because they're standing on one side of the mountain, and we're looking at them saying, I don't understand where you're coming from. There's one mountain. What are you talking about? We have to understand perspective, because perspective becomes a big part in that power struggle. As we begin to really look at our troop dynamic, we understand that building a troop, building a team, comes from understanding each other. What are their families like? What do their parents do? And not only is that going to help you truly understand your youth better and get more out of them, it's going to help you get a lot more out of their families too. Because, hey, if mom's a photographer and dad's a chef, I'm just saying, built-in troop meetings right there, right? So the more we know about our parents, the more that we can utilize them and have them have ownership in what we're building. The more we understand the girls, the more we know where they're coming from. How many mountains do they see? How many mountains do we see? As we're working with them, we understand that sometimes we're going to get frustrated because we have a picture in our heads. And that picture is we're creating this great troop meeting, and we've done all the crafts, and we've cut out all these little intricate things, and we've put them in baggies, and we know the girls are going to be excited about it, and we show up, and we get there. And then the one girl throws a rock in our plan. And our perfect Norman Rockwell moment of how we thought this meeting was going to go, it doesn't quite happen like that. And we got to think on the fly. But our expectations come from our perceptions. How we expect. There's this great activity I read in an autism book where you have one person with their eyes closed, and you explain to them how to draw a very simple picture, a house. You draw a square, and then you draw a triangle, but you can't tell them what it is. How many times do you think the picture the person draws actually turns out looking like a house? Very rarely. Yeah, zero. Very rarely, unless they catch on. Because you said, okay, well, you're going to draw, a triangle over the square, and they draw a triangle up here and a square down here, and you're going to... And the thing is that what they're picturing in their head is very different than what we're picturing in our heads. So understanding that we are coming from different places will sometimes help alleviate some of that frustration. Because again, right now it's more about getting the girls to understand, accept, get excited, be engaged, than it is making this work out the way it was in our heads. Some of the best meetings are completely different how they come out than how we went in. Because you know what? The conversations that stem, that we allow to stem, can take us places that the girls don't necessarily want to go, but need to go. And in doing that, the outcome you get is girl-led. As we look at girl-led, we look at how many leaders look at the outcome of what the girls give and goes, oh my God, the stickers are all crooked. I can't use that for our bridging. I need to fix it. No, you don't. Because when they looked at it, they saw it as beautiful. When we look at girl-led, what we see is encouraging girl passion. And here's the thing. I have 18 6th through 8th graders. Yeah. They go through puberty at the same time. Right. Well, our girls come in and they want to keep coming back. Because in this opportunity, they have the opportunity to say, hey, I don't want to sit down and book learn. I want to go to the college campus and meet girls like me that are working towards their future. How do we do that? We have to understand that where they want to go, the only way for us to get them there is to understand them and understand what their needs are. And the only way to keep them coming back is to celebrate those diversities, to allow them to say, hey, you know what? I'm passionate about art. Can I lead an art meeting? I'm passionate about technology. Can my silver award be about that? I want to teach people about suicide. Will you help me? And no matter how uncomfortable it makes us, allowing them to lead their passions where they go keeps them engaged. So girl-led, very strange for the adults who want to just be like, it would be so much easier if I give you the map. But the truth is, how many of us growing up, if somebody said, the way to get to where you are now is from A to B, how many of us would have wanted to skip the journey? The girls are going through very much that very same process right now. Oftentimes what makes a good team, I often say, is what makes a good recipe. Think about, for instance, where your eggs came from, and where your milk came from, and where your flour came from. All very different processes, all very different animals, all very different situations, but your cake wouldn't be as sweet without each one of them. So keep that in mind. Of course, as we look at building our team, we understand, again, the idea of utilizing strengths. Also, talking with versus talking to. How many times in our lives have we had situations, and you know what, it's funny, I made this slide, and then I talked to Martha who said, you're gonna be doing a webinar. And I said, okay, so I don't have people, I don't have feedback. This is talking to, I'm not good with this. You know, talking with is having that conversation, is not necessarily just saying to a kid, this is the way it is, but why do you see it from the way you see it? And having those conversations, those engagements, truly allow us to build relationships, which is the most important thing that we're doing. Of course, we understand the difference between respect and obedience. Obedience is easier, respect lasts longer. In that moment of, will you all stop talking, what do we want? We want obedience. Stop talking. Why can you not all stand still? We are at a flag ceremony. Stand still, right? A bunch of little daisies. We want them to it's just a second. Can you just smile for this one picture? That's a really good one where we regularly want obedience. One picture, would it kill you? Just one, right? But the truth is, we're at a different level with our kids right now. Our youth believe that they don't have to give respect if they don't get respect. And that's a big shift in the conversation. But here's the thing, we can work with that, because if you didn't respect those kids, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be in that room. And we all want to feel as if we are respected, but they know if they are too. So allowing that communication, that conversation, I want you all to think for just a moment. Close your eyes. Think back throughout your life. If you ever had a time in your life as a youth where you truly felt listened to, heard, respected, accepted, understood. Now, normally I ask for a show of hands, but you guys are on camera, so I'm not going to do that, all right? But think about that. How many of you can say with some level of certainty that you have an answer for that question? And I'm not asking what the answer is. With some level of certainty, do you have an answer in your head? Have you, when you were a kid, did you have people in your life that truly heard you? Can you guys, with some level of certainty, give me an answer to that? Sure. Now, as a youth, can you tell me how many Christmas cards and Christmas gifts you got from the ages of 10 to 18? Because the gifts don't matter. The physical stuff doesn't matter. What you got in your hands doesn't matter. But, because you're not going to remember that in 20 years, 30 years. But what you do remember is the person who listened to you, the person who heard you, the person who respected you, didn't demand obedience, but built that relationship. That's what sticks. So as we're working with our youth, understanding that it's all about this relationship, we also need to understand that sometimes youth is a very confusing time. Do they have certain rules in your troop meeting that are different than the rules in their school? Do they have rules in your troop meeting that are different than the rules in their house? How many houses do they have? Are the rules different from mom's house to dad's house to your troop meeting? And how do they manage that? Helping them be able to understand respect allows them to build these coping skills that helps them better go through these situations versus just understanding I have to be this person for you, and I have to be this person for mom, and I have to be this person for dad, and I have to be that person for my gym teacher, and that person for my math teacher. They don't know that they can just be them and cope and have that be fluid unless we teach it to them. And honestly, many of our parents don't know that either. We want to teach them ownership of their own lives, their own situations, and their own troop. And of course, we want to build opportunities for equity versus equality. These are probably two of my favorite cartoons in the whole wide world. It's the whole idea of, are we giving people all the same, or are we giving people what they need? Are we looking at youth passion and what the youth are good at and making them feel successful no matter what they're good at versus what they're not good at? Or are we all holding the same yardstick to every single girl? Because some of these girls are going to come in and they're going to be great at camping, and they're going to be able to build fires and use, get around spiders, and yeah, I don't do that. I go out there. Some are better. And you know what? In the same respect, we're going to have some girls that want to do math and engineering and science. And there's a place for all of them. And not saying to them, well, because you didn't come to our camping trip, this is a concern for me because you haven't been showing up. The most successful troops allow the girls to be able to be successful at what they're successful in. We have one rule in my troop. Don't say never. So if I say to you, we're going to do a rock wall. Well, I could say never right now to the rock wall, but in general, if that means that you put on the harness and you step on the first step and you go, I'm good. And then the next time you do too, that's okay. Because then when we're doing STEM later, you're going to be the rock star. And the girl who goes, that looks yucky, I don't want to touch it, she just has to do that. Let them build up where their comfort level lies, because then they're all going to see each other's passions, and they're all going to become more well-rounded. As we begin looking at working with diverse youth, we also understand that diverse youth means conflict. And we had a whole training today regarding conflict, so I don't want to beat this as a dead horse, because the truth is, there's nothing I can say that's better than what you've already heard. But as we're looking at youth-specific, we want to understand that there's choices. Saying to a youth that's having a conflict with another youth, okay, you know what? What options do you have? Do you need a mediation? Can you talk to that person? Is this a situation where you may need to choose to avoid? Is this a situation where you need to use your words and use your I statements? Giving them options is a great opportunity. And of course, utilizing things like problem-solving methods. So, for instance, what is the problem? What does that problem look like? What does that problem look like to each youth? And what might we try to do about it? Actually taking the steps together to come up with a plan, and then evaluating that plan. Did it work? Did it not work? How can we use it differently? To get to the conflict resolution level as adults that we heard about this morning, it starts with this, with our youth. Versus, okay, everybody, just stop fighting. Take them through the process. Because you will never have conflict-competent adults if you do not have conflict-trained youth. Of course, as I said before, we need to be committed to diversity, but it's happening whether we're committed to it or not. because each youth, even if they look the same, are amazingly and exceptionally different. Instead of looking at it as a problem to overcome, we need to look at it as an opportunity to notice, appreciate, recognize, build on, and celebrate. As we begin to utilize inclusivity in our service units, do we have diverse leaders? Can they bring in different activities? Just because an activity didn't work 5 years ago, are we like, oh, we've tried that didn't work? Or are we like, you know what? You have a different take on it? Try it again. Does our community have special diverse activities that we can tap into and support? All of these things are opportunities. And of course, are we encouraging new activities that may be outside of our comfort zones? Because all of these things are opportunities to not just have diversity, but to be visualized, to be seen by diverse people that may not have seen us, known us, or accepted us in the past. It is truly important that we recognize that we talked about ACEs briefly before, adverse childhood experiences, and it is a pretty dark and scary thing that this is the potential of affecting a youth's health for the rest of their lives. But here's the twist, because I can't leave you with a dark spot. The twist is that they have found true success through supportive factors, that supportive factors trump ACEs. So when a youth has family consistency, financial stability, great activities, a school that they are empowered by, activities that, the things, whether it be in school or out of school, that they truly feel accepted in, those are supportive factors. You are supportive factors. Yesterday, you went through your day thinking, I make a difference to kids. I tell you now, not only are you changing a kid's day, just your willingness to volunteer changes a child's life. And I'm not just talking through the fact that you taught them a new skill. I'm talking about you are the medicine for ACEs, each one of you. And by us being more inclusive, by us being more accepting, by us being a partner versus a parent, we have the ability to truly change lives of children. We are the only consistency some of these youth have. And the truth is, we're creating the leaders for the youth of today. And that's a very different leader than 20 years ago. It is important that we understand that currently we're in a world that is truly divided. And right now, we need to be part of a better future for our families, for our communities, for our leaders tomorrow, but absolutely for our girls. Thank you so much.